One thing that quite possibly gave the Bears a little boost last night, news that broke just within a couple of hours before kickoff that stunned everyone. Hall of Fame linebacker Dick Butkus. And it feels like there should be a higher title than Hall of Famer for Dick Butkus. He's one of the all-time greats. He's arguably the best defensive player in NFL history. He epitomized the middle linebacker position in only 9 years in the National Football League. He died at the age of 80. Peter, it was before my time. He was drafted the year I was born. But he and Gale Sayers were the two players that I always kind of heard people talk in hushed, reverent tones. I had no experience. I had no real-time knowledge. All I saw was the NFL Films highlights, and it seems like every play that Dick Butkus made was some sort of a highlight where he is hitting someone the way they did back in the 60s and 70s.
Well, Mike, I think what is most notable, and I've got 400 things to say, so let's parse them out a little bit one at a time. I think it's most notable that in the 1965 draft, the Chicago Bears had the third and fourth picks in the draft. And with the third pick, they picked Illinois linebacker Dick Butkus. With the fourth pick, they picked Kansas running back Gale Sayers. And as I talked last night to Dan Deerdorf, who played against Dick Butkus and who fiercely admired Dick Butkus, and Fran Tarkenton, who played against Dick Butkus and more fiercely admired Dick Butkus. And the impression that they gave me was essentially that this guy was not only the best defensive player they ever saw, but he epitomized everything that was great about the sport of football. Now, look, in the first 50 years of football, you would say that some of the highlights that we saw of Dick Butkus absolutely creaming guys in the middle of the field and laying them out and them being unconscious. We would all say that, that's something that had to be fixed about the NFL, obviously, or else the NFL is not going to be around forever. I get it. However, in those days, it was legal. Dick Butkus played by the rules, and Dick Butkus made you fear playing the Chicago Bears. There's a great story that Fran Tarkenton told me, his center, Hall of Fame center Mick Tingelhoff. During the week, as Tarkenton told me, he said, look, it was a different game in those days. I'm the one who basically installed our offense every week and decided what we were going to do on offense. And I remember early in the week when we were playing the Bears, Mick would come to me, and he's the one who would have to take on Butkus. And he would say things like, hey, give me a break this week. We got Butkus. And, just make sure that we have a lot of plays kind of that go away from Butkus. And I think, and Mike, what was so interesting about talking, especially to Fran Tarkenton, I'm telling you, Mike, Fran Tarkenton I think he's 83 years old. Last night when I talked to him, he was so emotional that I know he had been crying. And he said, I've had so many people recently die in my life. And Mick Tingelhoff died a couple of years ago. That was such a sad moment. Bud Grant died this year. Oh my God, I love Bud Grant. But for some reason, the death of Dick Butkus has hit me so hard. I have been emotional for the last 3 hours and I can't stop because I feel like a part of football history has just died.
And that's a great way for him to put it, because that's the way I felt as well. First of all, we had no warning. There wasn't an illness. There wasn't any sense that the end was coming for Dick Butkus. It just kind of dropped out of the blue that Dick Butkus had passed. And in this day and age, 80 is far from being on the brink of checking out if you're healthy. you just keep going and you keep going. And Dick Butkus was a guy that we just thought would keep going. But you said something that I probably knew at some point, but had forgotten. The idea that Butkus and Sayers were drafted consecutively.
It's unbelievable.
And Peter, again, how did they not get to a Super Bowl? How did they not compete? What was wrong with the Bears that they have the ultimate chess piece on each side of the ball from 1965 through whenever Gale Sayers had his knee injuries? But still, you've got a window of 3 or 4 years where you've got the best of the best on offense and defense, and the team couldn't do anything with it.
Hey, Mike, that's one of the big questions, honestly, of NFL history. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they never really had a quarterback. And honestly, Mike, Gale Sayers was never, I think his 4th year, he suffered a knee injury. And as great as he was, and he was an incredible football player, as Fran Tarkenton said to me last night, there was Jim Brown and there was Gale Sayers, and that was really it. They were the 2 best backs. And, in those days, and really, why did Butkus only play 9 years? Knee injuries. And to me, they are 2 guys who, because medical science just simply wasn't advanced in 1968, 1969, you get a big knee injury. Ask Joe Namath. You get a big knee injury and your career is going to be probably permanently derailed. But I think that, I want to tell you one other quick story, just because I had this on my mind that I really wanted to tell, that I was putting together a book in 1990 for Sports Illustrated. I spent a couple of weeks at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. They wanted me to do basically a pro football history book, best players of all time, best games, best teams, everything. So I studied it really hard. And early on in my sports writing life, I had made a statement or written a story about the great Dick Butkus and called him the best defensive player of all time. Well, then that was like in the middle of Lawrence Taylor's career. And then later on, basically I changed my mind. I said, I thought that Lawrence Taylor was more impactful and everything. And I saw Butkus once, this was 20 years ago. And he knew, he knew that I had once called him the best and then Lawrence Taylor the best. And he looked at me in a very disgusted way. And he basically said, I don't remember his exact words, but he made it very clear, I know what you did, and he thought clearly that in his day he was the best, and in his day he was. But I think the amazing thing was, Mike, what's different about football today, honestly? There's a great clip right now of Butkus, and there's going to be 100 of these making the rounds this weekend. Butkus, team captain, walking up to midfield before a game for the coin flip with somebody else, 2 captains on each team, Chicago versus Buffalo, shakes hands with each guy, said some, forgettable pleasantries. And, and then, the ref says, okay, you'll receive, you'll kick off. Gentlemen, have a good game. And Butkus walks away and looks at the 2 Bills guys and said, a-holes. And it's all because he hated the opponent. Paul Hornung once said that he treated his opponent like that kid you really hated his guts on the playground. Every day and all his opponents were like that. Nobody was special. Nobody was spared. And one of the things that both Tarkenton and Deerdorf said, independent of each other, I didn't have them on the phone at the same time, but independent of each other, they both said that one of the great things about their post-career is that they became friends with Dick Butkus, because Butkus viewed, If you're in the fraternity, you're one of us. And man, we're going to be together forever, whether it be in the Hall of Fame fraternity or whether it be in the ex-player fraternity. But he hated you when he played against you. And when it was over, he said, let's go have a beer. Not the same day. He still hated you after the game. But after the career, he didn't hate you anymore because you had been basically in the same sport, playing this, what in those days was much more of a gladiatorial sport.
And people who have discovered football in the last 20 or 30 years are stunned by that reality because today's players band together for a variety of reasons. They're in it together. Yeah. Health and safety is a greater concern. There's movement every year of players from team to team. So that guy that you are potentially taking a cheap shot at now may be your teammate next year. He may be your teammate next week. Back in the 60s and 70s, you went to one team and you stayed with one team. There was no way out. There was no free agency. You were there until the team was done with you. And then the question was, would there be another team out there that would give you a chance? But so many of those teams were constructed through the draft and undrafted free agency, and those are the guys. So it was very easy to hate everyone because this is my team. These are the only guys I'm ever going to play with. And everybody else is my rival. Everybody else is my foe. Everybody else is the object of my hatred. And it fit with the way they played the game. So I'm sure plenty of guys were like Dick Butkus. He was just one of the best physically and one of the most intense, and he personified that feeling. But that's how it was back then. And that's how fans view it. Fans don't view their loyalties as transferable. So that's one of the things that I think a lot of the older school fans miss, that the players don't hate each other like they used to. But I think there's also plenty of good, far more good than bad, given the way that the sport has changed, where there's a more collegial quality among players and they take care of each other. And you don't see guys stomping on people's fingers anymore or, under the pile trying to twist and bend and poke and things that we used to hear about all the time. When it happens now, it's a big deal because it's so rare. It used to happen all the time.
I think when you just start talking about the difference in eras, then this is a crazy story. I'm going to use this in my column Monday. So here's a little preview of my Monday column. When Dan Dierdorf came into the NFL, his rookie year was 1971. So the Bears were kind of going by the way. Butkus was, nearing the end. He wasn't at the end, but I think it was in his 7th year then. So the first thing that Dan Dierdorf did, he played in the college all-star game that year. Look that one up, kids. And then his first day of training camp with the St. Louis Cardinals was actually in Lake Forest, Illinois, because the Chicago Cardinals used to be the franchise used to play in Chicago, and they had been in St. Louis for 10 years, I think, at that point. But they were still training in Lake Forest, which is where the Bears were, obviously. So that year, they went and had a scrimmage in Indiana on his first day in training camp. And so Dierdorf didn't play, but he went with his team, his St. Louis Cardinal teammates, to play the Chicago Bears. And in that training camp scrimmage, Dick Butkus laid out a Cardinals running back, and the guy was knocked unconscious on the field. And Dierdorf said that Butkus stood over him, and it's reminiscent of the old Chuck Bednarik standing over Frank Gifford play that has been immortalized with that great picture over time. But he stands over this running back, Butkus does, and he says, "Don't you ever come in my place again." And as Dierdorf said to me, he said, we're all watching this. We're saying, oh my God. And as Dierdorf said, Dick, he can't hear you. He's unconscious. And so that was Dan Dierdorf's introduction to professional football. The fact that in a scrimmage in the middle of the summer that meant nothing that Dick Butkus was playing like it was Super Bowl 55.
Well, and that's definitely the kind of intensity that epitomized the sport back when Dick Butkus was playing. And it was a stunner, as we said earlier, a shock. A guy who's one of the bedrock players in NFL history, Dick Butkus, passing on Thursday at the age of 80. We're going to take a break. When we return, we'll have more PFT Live. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.